Welcome to a football show Monday edition, L'Jarius Sneed edition. That is Zach Lyons. I am Braden Gall, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. We have a super fun show planned because we're just going to basically we're going to will into existence the next big move for the Tennessee Titans, because every time, Zach, we talk about a big topic on a show, within a couple of days, it happens. So I'm going to win the lottery. That's just what I'm going to say today on the show. We're going to talk about what it would mean for my life and for your life and for everyone else's life if we all won the lottery together. No, if you want to jump into the comment section, please do. We have time for you guys today. As of course, we'll be discussing the latest big piece of Titans acquisition news, the trading and signing of L'Jarius Sneed as CB1 and what it does to everything. What it does to the offseason plan, what it does to expectations for the season, and what it does for the draft strategy moving forward. Of course, Brian Callahan speaking today down in Orlando at the NFL meetings, talking about some of the things that they still need. So we've got some insight there as well. StackingTheInbox.com, PaulKaharski.com, Football and Other F Words, Hot Read Podcast, Music City Audible. I don't know where else and what else you will need to understand L'Jarius Sneed and the Tennessee Titans more than what we are giving you, Titans fans, this week on the shows.
You're going to need to hear what we have to say.
I just want that one to linger there for a minute. Okay, so lots of stuff to do today on the show. Lots of fun. Of course, there are some questions that I think mostly positive with all the things the Titans have done. Mostly positive. I think fans should be excited. All of that stuff doesn't mean there aren't some questions that need to be asked and answered about Sneed and the future of the Titans. But we do have some big news here at the front end. Of course, first of all, Kingston Group, our great sponsor, has been with us for many, many years. And here's the deal, Zach. I do not have to tell anyone about the Kingston Group. I just don't. If you've listened to this show and you followed us, you know what the Kingston Group is. You know what they can do for you in certain situations. I don't need to tell anybody about the Kingston Group anymore. So I'm just not going to do it other than mentioning their name and that you should know what the hell's going on with the Kingston Group. So go to the Kingston Group, buildkg.com. All right, the big news today for us personally is we're going to have some draft party news here from Sinkers Beverages. And this is all going to be for charity. This is all going to be for kids in Middle Tennessee. And it is all going to be for the NFL draft. So I don't think we need any sound effects. Let's just get to it here, Zach. Here's what we're doing. Last year,
I don't have any sound effects.
Last year, you guys sold out the place. Sinkers has this incredible office, incredible viewing space, this old, beautiful building, Track 1 right there in Wedgwood, Houston, very centrally located in the city for all you Titans fans who wanted to come in and have a great evening last year. We had a great turnout, sold out every ticket, raised a bunch of money for charity, which is, of course, the name of the charity is Our Kids. It deals with sexually abused children. It's been around for like 35 years. It's like one of the largest clinics of its kind in the country. All the money went to them. We had a fully catered, all-you-can-eat, all-you-can-drink draft party. It was great. It was so much fun. And you guys, all of you, and I want to name all of you guys that showed up, but I don't have the whole list in front of me. But so many great folks showed up, and Elliot and Tim and Stoney and just on and on and on down the list. So many of you guys. And you sold out every ticket. So here's what we thought. And Sinkers was so on board with this. Look, we got to do better this year. We got to do better. So we're going to have the exact same party on Thursday night. All you can eat, all you can drink, open bar, live reaction show. Zach, you and I are going to be there. We're going to be reacting live to the 7th pick or when the Titans pick. It's going to be a lot of fun. Big party. But here's what we're doing for Friday night. Rounds 2 and 3. And for now, just pick 38. But there's a whole lot of other things going on at that time. The draft is phenomenal. It's fun for everybody. We are going to sell 11 tickets. The 11 tickets are going to be sold to the Friday night exclusive off the record a football show, Football Words live commentary of the second and third rounds. We are going to have a high-end bourbon tasting where you are going to get one particular glass of bourbon that costs more than the entire ticket. Okay? There's one glass. There's a couple of them on here that you're going to get your money's worth. All food catered. We got special guests planned for Friday night. And everything you get, Zach. You get Zach Lyons F Words text chain off the record intel. It is a private football show, F Word show for just the starting 11 people that get tickets to that event. It's $100, and every penny of that, we do not make a penny on that. Every penny of that goes to charity to help the kids. So we're stepping up our game thanks to Sinkers Beverages this season.
I mean, if you get one glass of high-end bourbon / whiskey, scotch, whatever it may be, and it's more than the actual ticket, but that is just one glass of the brown liquor that you may be getting, because we're probably going to have 3 or 4 bourbon tastings. I know that I've heard there's going to be a special limited edition for roses is going to be there.
Ooh,
Beverages got a little bit of intel.
yeah.
Uh, so that's going to be nice. I love Four Roses myself, but you're also getting food. And like you said, there's going to be a lot of wink, wink, nudge, nudge information that you are going to get about the Tennessee Titans, about certain goings ons behind the
Yep.
scenes stuff. So that's almost worth. And then, of course, a little special guest,
Absolutely. So again, you guys were so great about this last year. You made the event so fun. I had an absolute blast. I know, Zach, you might have had too much fun based on how you felt Friday morning. But the bottom line is Friday night, we just had to up the deal, man. We had to up the ante. So you're going to get a flight. I think it's a five different bourbon tastings. You're going to get food, and you're going to get off the record commentary with special guests for the second and third rounds on Friday night. We're going to be there as long as you want to be there. It is all off the record, no live show, no live taping. So if you want to be there and hear the information, hear the content, hear the juice, hear the goods, hear the tea, then you got to be there in person, and you got to buy a ticket to help support children. You know what I mean? It's not, you're not helping us. We literally, this is not after costs, all the proceeds. No, this is every penny. I'm doing this for free. We are showing up for free for you guys. Every penny of this goes to help children in Middle Tennessee. So we've got some great food plans for you, got some guest plans for you, got some bourbon plans for you, but it's going to be a ton of fun. Right now, you can go to Sinkers Beverages, of course, the website right there, sign up for the in-crowd, and it should already be live as of a couple of minutes ago. You should be able to go buy tickets right now. Exclusive, only 11 people as of right now will be allowed in on Friday night. It's our starting 11, of course. So there you go. Please go sign up there. And if you need any questions, if you have any questions about how to get to it or whatever, you can always shoot Zach or I a DM or send me a tweet or whatever, Instagram, whatever, and we'll get in touch with you guys. Otherwise, let's talk about L'Jarius Sneed. Sound good?
Let's do it.
All right, so I want you to sort of let's lay out the facts and the details here first. Of course, this is a guy just finished his 4th season, one of the best press cover corners in the entire NFL. He went up against Ridley, DJ Moore, Garrett Wilson, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, Cam Sutton, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Jamar Chase, basically dominated all of them. Andy Reid this morning told Paul Kaharski, like, his favorite corner, one of his favorite players, not just on the field, but off the field. They swap 7th round picks this year. The Titans give up a 3rd round pick next year to acquire this person, and then they sign L'Jarius Sneed to a 4-year, $76 million contract. At time of recording, that $55 million guaranteed is maybe a bit of a air quotes there. If you want to tell everybody a little bit about what the actual guarantees could look like and where he ranks, where does $19 million per year rank? If you want to give some folks some contract details, those are the sort of starting points that everybody needs to know.
Yeah, I mean, right now, what we've heard is that it's roughly $19 million per year, 4-year deal. Of course, my Twitter crashes, I guess, right when we decide to ask this question, so I don't have my rankings up. I believe that it's $55 million guaranteed, but not fully guaranteed. So I would assume that is going to be anywhere from $44 to $46 million fully guaranteed off the cuff. I would think that maybe 44 makes sense because he was wanting 22 per year. And if you have a 2-year, technically 4-year 72 turn into a 2-year 44, what does that make it? $22 million per year. So I would assume probably 44 million is probably fully guaranteed, maybe a little bit more than that, because that would put him, I think, below other fully guaranteed contracts, but higher than what Jalen Johnson just got. Because I think Jalen Johnson got $43.8 million fully guaranteed.
And honestly, and listen, Bo's already asked. All right, Braden, convince me it's a good thing, because you convinced me last show that it shouldn't happen. I wasn't necessarily arguing that it shouldn't happen. I was sort of just saying I don't think they're a cornerback away from being a contender. But we'll get into what this means for the season in just a minute, because they still have more moves to make. But I think on its surface, it's hard not to argue with the price point. It's hard not to argue with the trade acquisition cost. If it is structured, Zach, and I'll ask you, the contract guru, about this. If it is structured like most contracts, where you sort of front load some money and there's some guaranteed at signing and roster bonus stuff, but then like there's an out somewhere, probably after 2 years, maybe 3, it's not going to ever be fully $76 million. So I think the other thing to consider with Sneed, maybe unlike Ridley to some degree, is he still only played 4 years in the league. This is still a fairly young player.
Yeah, when you said that, I hadn't really checked that part of it, but when you had said that, I was like, really, just 4 years? And to be honest, I think people are going to have to understand one thing, and something that I've been thinking about, and I brought up a couple of different times since the Senior Bowl discourse about NIL and all that kind of stuff. Your players are going to be older. They're going to be older on their second contract than what we're used to seeing. And this is probably one of the first ones where you're kind of like, Jalen Johnson's on his second contract and he's 2 years younger. Well, but Sneed's only been in there for 4 years. So, I mean, it's not, again, it's all about tread on the tires and stuff like that when you're kind of balancing all this different stuff out.
Yes, Bo, it does elevate the need at linebacker, but we'll talk about what Brian Callahan has already told us this morning, actually, according to Paul Karski in just a minute. I think you're right. Like, look, I think he's played only 57 games. I think he started every single game the last 2 years, except for one last year where they actually rested him in the final game of the season. I think he missed one game in his second season, but he's played less than 60 games because he only played.
As far as I know, he's only missed 3 games in all. Like for his whole career, he's only missed 3 games.
Well, he played 9 games.
Injury, 1 for rest, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he played 9 games his rookie year. So I don't know if he was just like not active or not prepared or not ready yet. But I have to go back and double check that. But that was the COVID year and everything. But yes, he's 27 years old. And so you're getting him on his second contract just like had you drafted him. But so I think ultimately it pushes Chidobe Awuzie down to cornerback 2, which makes him a more valuable and more profitable or more efficient player at that position. It gives you freedom to play Roger McCreary where you want to play him. It gives you freedom to if you end up with Elijah Molden as your starting safety, you feel better about it because you have 2 press corners that are knocking the shit out of receivers and disrupting routes from the beginning. That should help your safeties do their jobs a little bit better. If you are stuck with Hooker and Molden as your final 2 safeties, sounds like that might not be the case, but we'll see. Much like Ridley, it opens up the rest of the play calling for the rest of the team. And again, I've got questions about the entire strategy we can talk about with Sneed in just a minute, but I want to focus on the positive. I still don't think they were this player away from winning the division, but it is hard to argue with the strategy of how they have like methodically approached their needs. And Ridley and Sneed, top corner on the market this year. Ridley, top receiver on the market this year. Cushenberry, top center on the market this year. You cannot argue with the influx of talent. And when you have that much cap space, it ain't my money. Who cares? Go try to win some shit.
Right. I look at it like this. It feels very much that the approach for this defense is going to be, we are simplifying everything. We're making everything easier with all these additions, right? So Roger McCreary, you never really have to go outside. You just stay inside. You're in the slot. We don't ever have to really, use you in versatile ways. We can if we want to, maybe put you as a little bit of a box safety at some point or something like that. But primarily, this is your job. Kenneth Murray, see ball, get ball, see player, tackle player. That is because they even mentioned today at the breakfast that basically Kenneth Murray, they just are fully convinced that it was just a bad system, bad scheme fit in the Chargers. He did not fit that. That's what they have fully convinced themselves. Now, I have to see actual play to be convinced of that, but I hope they're right? But that seems to be the expectation there. Jeffrey Simmons is, don't worry about stressing out having to get to the corner or get to the quarterback in less than 2 seconds, because now we have Sneed and Chidobe Awuzie all on this outside. And over here, Sneed can do whatever he needs to do. He could be on any kind of receiver, any size, anything. He's going to take away something off the field, which then in turn lets Amani Hooker and Elijah Molden, or whoever the other safety is, have less responsibility and worry because they're going to be in their own little zone, their own little area of the field, and not have to worry. Amani Hooker doesn't have to worry. Oh, crap. Christian Fulton's not going to get his head turned around, or Sean Murphy Bunting's in the wrong spot, or this or that. Everything seems to be trending in a different direction. That direction is, let's keep it simple, stupid.
And I think ultimately, if you want to just take Brian Callahan at his word, which is he who passes the ball best wins, and just dumb down the entire incredibly complicated game of football to just a sentence. They've gone out and spend, like, I mean, we're talking, I'm trying to do the math on the top of my head here. It's like basically 40-ish, $50+ million a year on Ridley, Awuzie, and Sneed to pass ball better than other team. Like that's
Right.
clearly what their strategy was with these particular signings. They were also glaring holes of weakness on the defense, and now we're seeing how much they've invested in the defense. I do think in a division we talked about on Thursday where you have potential major upside with Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, and Trevor Lawrence as a group in a division long term. I think for now, in the next 2 or 3 years, you've answered a lot of questions about the passing game, both on offense and defense. And so from a strategy standpoint, I think it's hard to argue with what they've gone out and done. Again, it's not my money. It's not your money. If you're a season ticket holder, it's not your money either. What are you going to do? Roll $50 million over into next year? Like, at some point, you do need to spend it and try to win games.
Well, I look at it this way too. I think people aren't used to this way of building the roster. Now, they're used to seeing players get spent money on, right? I mean, they spent money on Bud Dupree. You can't say they were cheap about Bud Dupree. You can't say they were cheap about Derrick Henry. You can't say they were cheap about Ryan Tannehill, all this stuff.
Landry.
At the end of the day, they're this whole philosophy these last few years, and even Rand Carthon was a puppet that said all this last year, is that we are so used to them building inside out, build in the trenches, then we're going to hit the perimeter when we can. The problem is they failed to build in the trenches, and then it stunted their ability to do other things. Here, they're going perimeter defense, perimeter offense, and going on the inside. And I think that's the proper way to do it in today's NFL, because like you said, it's more about who can pass the ball and who can stop the pass, and then limiting your turnovers and getting turnovers, which turnovers are so fluky, can't really depend upon that. But if you look at how they're building, that's what they're building. They're building in a modern way. And what I like about the Sneed trade, as long as he passes the medicals, is that you have Sneed, McCreary, and Chidobe all for 2 years minimum. They're under contract for 2 years minimum, because everybody's going to, because McCreary only has 2 years left on his contract. And then Sneed and Cheeto, you can get out when you want to after 2 years. So it kind of alleviates the need to get a cornerback high, but you can still get one day 3 now in a deep class and not have to rely on that guy barring injuries. And then you can get you got Amani Hooker for 2 more years as well on top of all that. Elijah Molden's 1 more year. Okay, now maybe you can move safety a little bit higher up your draft board as a position that you're going to try address in the draft, and try to get, like, to me, Ryan Watts is a guy that played corner at Texas on the outside, who is going to definitely be better as a safety. And I think that's a guy that you could get in now, not have to play him in the 7th round, and shift him up your depth chart after a year or so, because you can cut Amani Hooker after this year and save $8 million if you find a cheap replacement. So this is another move that provides them so much flexibility, but also drives the point home that it's left tackle in the 1st round. Like, it is just, I love Rome Odunze. I love Malik Neighbors. I love Marvin Harrison Jr. I love all 3 of those guys. But, man, it sure does seem like it's left tackle in that 1st round.
Pass rusher? Trade back? No, we'll get to draft strategy in a second. I still, again, I think there are plenty of smart, intelligent questions we can ask about all these different things that the Titans are doing, Sneed in particular. But I think from the positive standpoint, you fixed a glaring need and done it the way that Brian Callahan has said. And I think Chef Rand said this. They are trying to take advantage of the quarterback on a rookie deal. You said 2 years. You basically said kind of all these deals are 2-year deals. Everybody's got 2 years. Well, those are the 2 years before you would extend Will Levis. Ideally, you learn that he's good enough, and then you extend him going into his final season, right? So that you want to get ahead of that. So these next 2 seasons are the 2 seasons where you've got all this money to play with. Take advantage of the fact that you think you have a starting quarterback who is championship caliber good, and you can build around him. Now, there are plenty of things we can discuss about how far away this team is from contending or competing for a championship, or what they still need to address, and we've got all of that. But I think it's one of those where I'm like we said last week, I'm just so surprised that the two things that everybody wanted the most, that seemed the most logical, are the two things that happened, which is Ridley and Sneed. It's normally it doesn't work that way. And I do think to address those positions the way they have, again, I think the trade itself, if you ask people in the know or listen to people in the know, it sounds like the trade terms were agreed to a long time ago. Like the third and the seventh round swap, that was not part of the issue. The issue was the physical and the contract. And it sounds like obviously the contract is cleared up. He does need to clear a physical, and that is a fair question to ask. Is like, hey, what's the long-term health prognosis of his knee? I think that's a fair question to ask. I asked some people in Kansas City what they thought, and ultimately they said it's not an issue in the short term, but that it could be something down the road. But that could be after you get out of the contract, honestly. So, right. But I think it's a fair question to ask. Say, hey, look, are we worried about this? Because he's a physical guy who plays up at the line of scrimmage, who needs power, very rangy guy. Is there a concern there? You just never know. You can't predict injuries unless his knee's already shredded, which I would assume they would find in a physical. So,
right. I look at it, and this whole knee thing, I've heard from a few different people that when this trade was going down, this whole knee issue really picked up from A to Z. But it's their A to Z Kansas City guy or whatever that is there. And that's kind of when it picked up. And then the way that Matt Verderam and the host of the radio show that he was on last week, they kind of mention it, but they kind of mention it in a way that makes you think, oh, it's not that big of a deal, which kind of leads into what you were saying is like, it's an issue, but it's not really an issue this year. Maybe it's an issue later, and it may never be an issue. You never know. But it's just one of those things that you kind of like monitor. But I heard everybody was talking about, oh my gosh, she just hardly ever practices and blah, 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 blah. Okay, look, that all stems from the summer, and that's fine. He missed 12 out of 19 training camp practices. Big freaking whoop. Like, are we really going to be that concerned? And listen, everybody said that D-Hop didn't practice, and then he turns around and practices every year. Or every practice. I think he made like 90% to 100% of practices. I'm sure he had like a couple vet days, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. And then in the regular season, you have 3 practices from week 1 all the way through the Super Bowl, right? 3 practices every week. And there were only 6 do not practices, 3 that were leading into week 18 where they knew who was going to sit. And then 3 leading into week 17, where guess what? He still played 98% of the snaps. He was 14, a limited participant out of 63, and 43, he was out of 63, a full participant. I don't know. And then he played like 17 games of 100-plus snaps, and the other 3 were 82, 94, 98. Yep. I don't know. I'll take a knee issue if it looks like that.
So D Good said, remember what they said about A.J. Brown's knee? And I'm going to lump Tajay Spears into this conversation just so that people kind of follow where I'm going with this. I'm pretty convinced that all 3 of their careers, statistically and from a probability standpoint, will be slowed or hampered or ended because of their knees. When that happens, we have no clue. Like you and I talked about this when they drafted Spears. It's not an issue today. It's not an issue. It doesn't make him more injury prone today. It means that maybe the life of his career is a little shorter on the back end. And I think this is absolutely the case with A.J. Brown. I think he is too big and too physical, and I think he puts a lot of stress and wear and tear on his knees. And watching that position and that player up close, I just think eventually at some point the knee is going to cause him a problem. It may not be a problem during that contract that he signed with the Eagles, and it may not be a problem for Sneed during this contract that he signs with the Titans. But if you ask me to predict what's going to end those 3 people's career or shorten it, it is probably tied to the knees. But there's no physical way to project that. A torn ACL doesn't mean that this was a bad decision. Like that's fluky injury. That doesn't mean anything. It's like when the knee degrades to the point where you no longer have the explosiveness and you no longer have the durability. And it's like, that takes time. And so again, from my understanding, he's going to be fine in the short term. Does it mean that it couldn't become an issue in year 2 or 3? I think that's fair to ask, but there's no way to predict it. You can have every genius Dr. Andrews that there is under the sun go look at somebody, and unless they see a torn up body part today, which would end the deal, then you kind of have to just go, all right, whatever, and move on, and just be like, well, let's hope we get like 2 great years of Sneed, maybe get a third really good year of Sneed, and then maybe you want to walk away. Or maybe he's great for 4 years and you're going to pay him again. Like, who knows? But yeah. I think that's sort of how I look at the Sneed thing. Now, here's ultimately one of my other bigger questions about this. And they're still doing big things. And generally speaking, the team that wins the offseason and spends the most, and I'm going to include Sneed as a free agent because that's kind of what he is, it doesn't convert to championships. It doesn't translate. Philadelphia Eagles dream team, Jaguars, what they did a couple years ago. The Jets have done this in the past. Like, it's not really the way you build a successful championship caliber team long term. So what are your thoughts on just the amount of spending, the amount of big moves? Is it just because they were so bad and needed so much stuff that it almost doesn't matter that they had to spend the most or do the most? Or do you think their expectations internally now are, we're competing for the division championship because we've got some high-priced items and we think we're good enough to go do it? Where are you at now with the overall big picture approach to go big or go home for the Titans this offseason?
I think that they played a smart game this offseason. And what they kind of did was kind of let the market come to them. They were pretty aggressive with L'Jarius Sneed because they were in there day one, but it took, again, 2 weeks for that deal to even materialize in anything that actually ended up in a trade. But you hear them talk about Calvin Ridley. They kind of like kept Calvin Ridley on the horizon. Like, they were kind of like, okay, he's over here. We'll see. And then some other stuff happens, and they were like, okay, now we got some money, so now we'll go after Calvin Ridley. So it wasn't really like the plan was, we got to have Calvin Ridley this offseason. We got to have L'Jarius Sneed. Is more like other things happen, and then they were like, okay, now we move on and pivot over to this. And I'll say this to push back on the narrative, like winning the offseason and spending the most money. The difference between the Titans and yes, they are spending a lot of money, but the difference between the Titans and those other teams that we have mentioned is the fact that nobody thinks the Titans won the offseason. I mean, right? I mean, like, the L'Jarius Sneed is the first time if any of these moves besides Lloyd Cushenberry has gotten real positive traction because they gave up so little for L'Jarius Sneed. But at the end of the day, people are still confused at why they even traded for L'Jarius Sneed because they're like, oh, do they think Will Levis is? So nobody thinks the Titans won the offseason. They spent the most money, but nobody thinks it. So I think that's a good thing for the Tennessee Titans to cling to. And a big difference is that, like, everybody's like, well, they're spending money, but they're still the Tennessee Titans. And I think it stems from, and I wrote about this in Stack in the Inbox, that everybody's darling head coach got fired and they made all the national media look stupid. And then he doesn't get a job, but they all cling to, well, this is clearly a dysfunctional organization that has no fucking clue what it's doing. And then it's coming out and making actually smart moves and making the national media look dumb. So they're just going to double down and say, well, these guys are idiots.
So I love a good media conversation because I really don't. I think all of the conspiracies in any subject matter, not just sports, but the amount of time and effort the casual fan or average person in this country spends on sort of these the conspiracy theories isn't the right word, but just like theories about how it functions and how it works. Almost all of it is a complete waste of time. A lot of it is that the Titans don't get clicks. They just don't. They never will. They if this was the Cowboys doing this, they would all be writing about it because the Cowboys get clicks, even if they're terrible moves or great moves. It doesn't matter. Like we've done this conversation a lot. The Titans simply don't get clicks. Are there a couple of reporters that might feel like that they were clearly had sources like Vrabel as a source, and maybe they were using him to write stories? And to your point, what you're saying, I completely agree. That's absolutely a possibility. The vast majority of folks who have no relationship with the Titans are just, I think your first point is right, is they're just not good enough yet to garner, like, hey, they're going for it this offseason. They won the offseason, but like they still really aren't.
But they didn't. Nobody's saying that. That's the thing, is I'm pushing back. They're actually saying the complete opposite. that they are big losers in free agency. So you're down right in your teacups, and you didn't see all the negative reaction to Calvin Ridley.
That's true. I did not see that.
Got. And so you missed a whole entire week of them just bashing the Titans.
Okay, fair point. Fair point.
That's what I'm saying is that, like, you can't say we objectively think that they are winning the offseason. But there are many people who the difference I'm trying to lay down is that the national consensus is that they have not won the offseason. Right. And so to me, that's a good thing.
No, I agree with you. And I think it's the Titans' small market and fan base not being huge and not being cliquey or whatever benefiting the Titans potentially, or at least the fan base or the coverage, I would say. What I mean is more like, forget the national conversation, forget the reaction to Ridley, forget the team that spends the most money doesn't use that to win championships normally in the offseason, and just no matter how much ink is spilled over the team's decisions, right? Like, regardless of what the national conversation is about a particular team, the team that builds by spending overtly in free agency is not the one that uses that to win championships in general as a broad philosophy. And so you're right. I agree. The conversation has not been that they are the winners or that they're the best or they're this or they're that. I think personally, my opinion is why this could be different than all the other times I've seen a team spend a ton of money to try to get better real fast is that this team still doesn't have championship expectations. That Eagles team that spent all that money to put the dream team together, like whatever it was 12 years ago or whatever, like they had a Super Bowl aspiration. They were trying to win the Super Bowl. Like the Jaguars were trying to win the division when they spend all the money. This is a team that I feel like is sort of still incrementally trying to improve year over year with the first year head coach who's never coached a game. Like, I don't see it as like, man, this is the coach's last chance to try to win the whole thing and the GM's last chance and they're going for it. Like, that's not what this is to me. And that to me is a subtle, but a difference between criticizing teams that have overspent in the past to solve problems and a team like this that's trying to sort of kickstart its next generation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and also look at like first year cash. This obviously doesn't include L'Jarius Sneed yet, but their first year cash is fourth in the NFL. But they also have 11 contracts, right? Like, above them is the Falcons with a quarterback signing that is 88. They're right above, but they only have 6 other contracts besides the quarterback. So, like, when you look at it, the Giants, they have signed 13 and they have 84 in cash. And the same goes for just total cash spending in the NFL for 2024. They're still ranked 18th for the entire team. So they're still an 18th cash spent in 2024. They rank 18th. So it's still not like they're really they were really smart, right? They got the best wide receiver on the market for a top 10 contract that's not going to be top 10 by the time the season rolls around. They got, and he has the really high ceiling to be a wide receiver one in the NFL. They spent money on the best center in free agency. They spent money. Now they've traded and going to spend money for one of the best corners, and probably he's going to end up being around like a top 8 contract, and he's a top 3 corner in the league. I don't know. Like, to me, that's smart spending. That's better spending than spending on Bud Dupree and spending on whether the Jaguar. I'd have to go see what the Jaguars spent a couple of years ago. But you know, if you talk about that, I mean, that was some bad free agent stuff like before. Like, there's a difference between spending money on good players and spending money on average players in a down market. And these are spending money on good players.
No, I agree. And I think within the confines of each player, good value. But I can't think of a team that has had a $90 million contract, a $70 million contract, a $50 million contract, a couple of $30 million contracts, a couple $20 million. Like, they have done a lot of that. And that's because they had so much space, but it's also because they had so many needs. Like, again, if you just have the money sit there, it serves you no purpose. It doesn't make you better. Even if you're just plugging a hole with a guy that is, Tony Pollard or, whatever it might be, Cushenberry, whatever, somebody who's good, but isn't necessarily elite or high end or is going to help you win a championship, but it's going to help you get to the team that can compete for a championship. So look, I think that's my subtle difference is this team is not in go for it mode. Like, they're not. And this kind of pivots into the draft strategy, which is I agree with what they've done. I'm willing to come around on what they've done, which is build outside in, right? Which is new. It's new. For those of us who are traditional football fans, it's always build inside out, right? Trench warfare, line of scrimmage. That's how you win games. There's the pup. He could be a Kyle Juszczyk type, I think. You can get him on the cheap.
You talking about Havana?
Yeah.
Or Jaheim Bell?
No, Havana. So I think there's still a ton of work to be done in the trenches on both sides of the line of scrimmage. That's very clear, and we're going to get to that in a second. But I'm willing to come around on.
Talk about the Browns, right? They have 400,000 plus contracts on their thing. Amari Cooper, Denzel Ward, Myles Garrett, Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson's over 200,000. And then they have 60, 58, 57 for Jack Conklin, Jerry Jeudy, and Dalvin Tomlinson, which Jack Conklin hasn't really lived up to that 60,000. Jerry Jeudy, good luck. And Dalvin Tomlinson, 57,000 seems a little rich, but
you're talking million? You mean million?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like Wyatt Teller's 56.8, David Njoku's 54.7. So like those are kind of like contracts that you kind of want to avoid, and I think that's the difference between the Browns and the Titans.
The Browns were good.
Lot of money to spend.
Well, and the
Browns were good 1 year. Let's
that's true.
Settle down a little bit and make sure that we all keep in perspective that the NFL is very volatile year to year, and a team like the Browns, who have had very little consistency year to year, I'd caution picking them to I would take their under on their win total if I'm going to be, especially since they got Vrabel over there fucking things up for him now.
Okay. Okay. Here's a good point. I think this is kind of ultimately where I'm at on this. And this is Jack Ripper. Great name. On paper, this team is miles ahead of what I was expecting. And I was expecting a quick turnaround. I don't think I expected, like if we did our starting players exercise like we did a couple of weeks ago, I think we'd have probably 2 times as many starting players solved and figured out and names slotted into positions just off the top of my head. That's to be expected when you invest in what you've invested in. But I still think there's still so much work to be done for a team that wants to compete. And so I think it's okay for Titans fans to be cautiously optimistic about all of this. Cautiously optimistic about Ridley's impact. Cautiously optimistic about L'Jarius Sneed playing lockdown cover corner. Cautiously optimistic that Pollard and Spears can replace Derrick Henry. Cautiously optimistic about Will Levis, which is ultimately what this all comes back to.
I don't think you have to be cautiously optimistic about the rushing attack being able to be good without.
That's true. Like to me, it's
like I understand everything else, but that's like the one thing I am for certain that will be good on running the ball.
Right. I just think it's okay. Defensive coaching staff, all 3 of the top guys, all doing new roles for the first time. Right. Like it's all. There's a lot of unknowns still left, and I don't think anyone should be going and screaming, Super Bowl, win the division, compete for playoff spots, etc. I think there's still a long ways from that. Depth is still a major issue. And like, again, if L'Jarius Sneed is so elite and so great, and you've said this on Twitter, they were not in this cap restrictive space where they couldn't have brought him back. Why they just let him go for a 3rd round pick? Like it doesn't mean that it wasn't the right move for the Titans, but it's still okay to say, all right, look, they haven't won a single thing yet. This is the offseason. Let's be optimistic. Let's be excited about this team and the decisions they're making and where they're going. But let's also be realist about this. Like there's still major holes on the offensive line, the defensive line, pass rusher, safety, linebacker, and depth at almost every position.
There's a difference between hope and expectations. And I think that is where fans, it's okay for fans to struggle with separating the two. But I saw a clip of Louis Riddick's from 2019 when the Browns signed Odell Beckham, and he talked about that would be the famous, the Browns are one of the darling free agent won the offseason kind of deals, right? And he was talking about how Browns fans would always hope that they were going to win games, but now that their expectations with that Odell sign is that they are going to win games. And I think heading into the offseason, I think you were hoping the Tennessee Titans were going to be good. And really, I think you could set the expectations that they are going to be good. I don't know if I'm ready to
competitive.
How many times have we seen the division loser go from worst to first? a lot in the AFC South. And this seems like a prime opportunity with the Colts kind of remaining stagnant, the Jaguars remaining stagnant. If Will Levis hits, it really seems like this is a team. And I know that we said that Texans are above and beyond everybody else in terms of, the talent on the roster. But sometimes you can have the most talent on the roster and still lose to an inferior team because you are getting outcoached, outplayed, injuries, anything like that. So I just I don't know. I kind of feel like this moves the needle for me in a way that's like, okay, I can have the open mind now that the Tennessee Titans could make a run at the division.
Yeah.
Does that mean that I expect it? No, but I do think that there could be, I think you could have the realistic point. If you were to say, Braden, I think Tennessee Titans could win the AFC South this year, right here, right today. I would disagree. That would not be my choice, but it wouldn't be like, well, you're an idiot for even thinking that. It's more of like, I could see it, but that's not where my mind's going to go.
No, I agree. So after the Ridley signing, I felt like sort of every possible win-loss scenario was sort of on the table finally, meaning they could score a bunch of points and they could win some games. And I mean within reason. I don't mean like 16-1. Like I mean like 9 or 10 wins, best case scenario. Like if you're saying worst case scenario is number 1 pick in the draft, bad, and best case scenario is 9 or 10 wins and you're competing for a division title. That's the range that I think they were in. I think I said last week, Texans are first in the division, but I have the other 3 teams essentially tied. I think I would have it be Jacksonville, Indianapolis, Titans in that order, but like basically 11, 12, 13 in the AFC. I feel comfortable now saying Tennessee, Jacksonville, Indianapolis, or Tennessee, Indianapolis, Jacksonville, but I feel comfortable with Tennessee being 2. I still don't know if that makes them a top 10 AFC team. I think they certainly could be, and I think that they've put themselves in a position to be, but would I be surprised?
That's the point, is that you have to kind of wait for the draft, right?
Yes,
to really figure out what this team's going to be, what direction they're doing, because you also got to see what other teams do. I mean, the Bills have a ton of draft picks, right?
Yep.
But they've also they've kind of been underachieving. They lost their starting center. Their wide receiver 2's gone, which is all stuff you can fix in the draft. But it's just kind of what you guys see. What do the Dolphins do? What do people do with these extensions and all this kind of stuff? So it's kind of like you kind of have to wait and see. But I would say this in the sense that I do think that I think the way that it is trending right now, I'd be very surprised if I didn't think the Tennessee Titans would be the number 2 in this division, clear number 2 in this division. But I also am starting to get like, because I see the Texans keep signing people, known names, not really big names right now, but known names. And I'm like, man, this seems really like the dream team. Like I am starting to get real dream team Eagles vibes from this team. That doesn't mean that's going to turn out the way, but just I get this weird sense right now. I'm like, man, they're spending a lot of money. They have they spent the most cash in year 1 this offseason so far.
Somebody in the comments, and I forget who said this, so I apologize, said the over-under right now is 5.5. I would take the over. I think I agree. I would take the over. But here's the other thing I want. This is a feeling that I just can't shake, because it's Will Levis's first year as a starter, full season. It's Brian Callahan's first season as a head coach. It's both coordinators' first year as coordinators. There's just a lot of, now you've got all these new pieces that are going to all try to come together. And football is a very hard sport. It's just, in general, it's a very hard sport. And I said this when Mike Vrabel was hired, and people kind of were like, no, that's not appropriate. And I said it on the air a lot because I thought hiring Mike Vrabel was, you're going to take 1 step back from malarkey to take 2 steps forward. That was my sort of analysis of the move. Like malarkey was here. There was a floor there. You kind of knew what you were going to get. You just won a playoff game, but you thought you could go higher with Vrabel, and they did. But they took a step back at first. And I think there's part of me that wants to caution fans and saying this could be a 2-year plan, like this could be another 5 or 6 win team, and that all of it pays off 2 years from now, especially when this draft class becomes a second year class. And
I think it's fair to say that there's a wide range of outcome.
Yes.
So I think that there's I don't think that they're going to have less than 6 wins. but they could have anywhere from 6 to 11 wins, and I wouldn't be surprised right now. And that's factoring in what I think they're going to do in the draft and the rest of free agency and fill in the holes and stuff. But when you look at their schedule, you're kind of like, man, this team is either going to win 6 games again, and that could be a proper expectations, or man, they could probably, if Will Levis hits. That's an 11. I mean, that's the thing. It's like it's all boils down to if Will Levis hits.
Yeah. So this, and honestly, I could see anywhere from like 3 to 11. But again, that's me being very like sort of safe with that prediction. Timmy says the only holes on defense is non-premium positions. Give people like Otis Reese a chance. He played well last year. So that leads us right into what Brian Callahan is. And I will completely disagree respectfully with Timmy, because you still have glaring holes at both tackle spots. You still have a glaring hole at pass rusher, at least one, if not two. You've got a glaring hole at starting inside linebacker, and you have a smaller hole at potentially at safety. Hopkins is gone next year, so depth at receiver is still an issue. I think depth at almost every position is still an issue. So I still think there's some premium stuff that they need to go figure out.
The only one that has a lot of depth is your quarterback room and your offensive line. That's really...
running back. Running back. It was good.
Yeah, I mean, it's just 2. I mean, we can settle down Julius Chestnut and Hassan Haskins people. We can settle down those.
I'm just saying, as a third running back,
they're the Otis Reese. They're the Otis Reese of.
But Julius Chestnut being your third running back with 2 guys that you feel like Tony Pollard, I think I'm fine calling him an established starting running back. And I think Tajay Spears, we all know how good he could be. So I think they're good. So ultimately, this is what Brian Callahan had to say. This was on paulkarski.com. Of course, you can also catch Zach's work over there at paulkarski.com. Remember, Sinkers Beverages draft party tickets are available. We'll send you that link. We'll post those links. So stay tuned to the socials and to YouTube and everything else. Offensive tackle, he said essentially that Jalen Duncan and MPF are absolutely guys that they're going to try to develop with his father, Brian Callahan. Dylan Radins was mentioned specifically as a guard, but that he kind of alluded to veterans, Zach. Like he was more talking about veterans as potential pieces they could still look to add, which I found to be a little interesting when he talked about tackle. We'll go position by position here real quickly to end.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. He goes, I thought it was interesting because what he's basically saying about Jalen Duncan and NPF is that they're going to be a part of the competition at right tackle. So their left tackle competition seems to be really off the board, which makes sense. I mean, if you got Bill Callahan in there, he's going to tell you, I can either make this guy left tackle or I can make this guy right tackle, right? Maybe there's a few guys that he can make both, but they're not on this roster. And it looks like Dylan Radins would likely compete with Daniel Brunskill for the right guard spot. So what that tells me is that it's all about left tackle. I personally think that they're going to sign Andres Pete and Marcus May at some point this week, because they did mention that now the Sneed stuff, once the Sneed stuff goes through, they'll be able to finalize some other signings or be able to do some other signs. So I kind of think that. So Andres Pete provides you a competition at left tackle and an insurance policy. So I'm thinking that Sadiq Charles is probably also going to be in this right guard competition, and then someone's going to get cut. Like whether it's Brunskill, whether it's Sadiq Charles, whether it's Radins, maybe they keep all of them just because you can never have too many offensive linemen. But to me, it sounds like right tackle is going to get another body there. It's not the plan is not NPF and Jalen Duncan, and we'll see what happens. It is those 2 guys and possibly 1 or 2 more players battling out for that right tackle spot. It's not on the roster yet.
He clearly said veterans. For the other positions, he said for middle linebacker, Brian Callahan said that the position is clearly on the forefront of their thinking, and he alluded to the draft. He mentioned the draft more when it came to middle linebacker, which makes sense because it is a non-premium position, and you probably could at 38 or even later in the draft find somebody that's maybe near the top of the positional rankings and maybe get him in the 4th round.
To be fair, it's a non-premium position. I'm always going to specify this is a non-premium money spent position, but it is a premium position on the defense. I do not care what anybody else says about it. It is a premium position on the defense. Not anybody could just be plugged in there and play.
Fred Warner and Nick Bolton would agree with you.
Yes.
But he said draft. He said draft about that position.
Well, because there's nobody to sign. Like they let that market pass them by, which is fine if you're going to get a L'Jarius Sneed. If you weren't going to get L'Jarius Sneed, and you weren't confident in it, then you really messed up by not letting that market slide. But they're going to have to address it, and I think the problem is that much like safety, linebacker and safety in this particular draft has a lot of guys that need their game polished and cleaned up quick if they want to start. You have very few day one starters at linebacker and very few day one starters at safety. And I'm talking about you may have 5 when you combine both position groups. Like, I don't even know if there's 5 day one starters, high-end day one starters that you want started. But you can't coach athleticism, right? Like, you look at Cameron Kitchens, and because someone had mentioned the Miami safeties earlier in the chat, and I'm writing about Cameron Kitchens. Got an article in the queue for tomorrow at stackandinbox.com. Spoiler alert. But he has all the instinct and ball skills in the world, but he is so freaking slow. And in the NFL, if you do not, it doesn't matter how smart you are if you're not fast enough. And to me, it feels like the linebackers and safeties are turning towards, if they're a little dumb, that's okay. As long as they are athletic and they have the fundamentals down, as long as they are athletic, we can fix everything else. You have the size, you have the speed to play the position, we'll fix everything else. And there's a lot of guys that have college production, but there are a lot of guys in this draft at linebacker specifically that kind of fit that mold that you can get on day 3. Trevin Wallace, Jordan McGee, I think last name is McGee, out of Temple. Edufan Ulafashuyo, and definitely butchered that, but that is from Washington. But there are Nathaniel Watson out of Mississippi State. There are guys that are athletic enough, but you have to make sure that they're, smart enough too, but they're at least open to learning.
Like the pick is in the 4th round is 107. Is that correct? Pick 107?
106.
106. If it's like Junior Colson out of Michigan at that spot.
Oh my gosh. If he falls that far, you
sign me up.
Fucking hit it out of the park.
Yeah. Sign me up.
I mean, I would be very surprised. To me, it's like,
I agree.
Junior Colson, Edgerrin Cooper, and Peyton Wilson are clear day 2 picks. I don't think anybody's going to go day 1. I'd be very surprised if the linebacker went day 1.
Jeremiah
I think
Trotter.
Edgerrin Cooper does have a chance to fall out of day 2, but I'm not really betting on that he's going to be a day 3 guy. But there's a lot to be desired on his tape that is not that good.
If one of those guys falls, is what I'm saying. One of those guys probably falls to the top of the 4th round, and maybe you get value there, and maybe you can coach him up and solve some of the things that you don't like about one of those guys. But that's ultimately what he alluded to. Safety, he said they're going to add some depth. Quote, doors aren't closed yet, which is your Marcus May take, or somebody else potentially. Or Justin Simmons. So that's your take there. And then for the edge, he basically said Harold Landry and situationally Arden Key is proven, which I thought was hilarious. He added the word situationally in there, which means, and he said 1 or 2 more people that they're going to add. They want to add proven options. So that's an interesting take there from the head coach about the position. But basically, he's pointing to the positions of need that we all agree that are obvious on the roster. And it sounds like he's leaving open the chance that there's some post-cut guys, some post-draft options, some more free agents today. I don't know, but
I mean, good luck on that. But I will say this: what that says to me, Rashad Weaver, hand in the dirt guy. That's what they view Rashad Weaver as. They don't view him as an edge because he did not even get mentioned in the edge. It was just Harden Key, Harold Landry, and you can never have enough pass rushers, and we probably at least need 1, maybe 2 more guys, which means pass rusher still a top 50 pick for this team, first 2 rounds. That needs to be floating out there. Do not just totally dismiss that if for some reason Joe Alt goes ahead of the Tennessee Titans, that maybe it's Dallas Turner at 7. Can't dismiss that. But at the end of the day, they're being bluntly honest about these players, right?
Yeah.
Skoronski's a guard. Radens is a guard. Here's your 2 guys at right tackle that can compete, and we're definitely bringing in more guys because we don't really know if they can be fully developed, right? They're telling you that Rashad Weaver, they don't consider an edge in this group. Of course, he's off golfing almost every day, so maybe he's not even caring. But it sounds like to me, I think people we talked about on Football and Other Efforts last week are people too worried about the position void left by Danico Autry in this hybrid role. when they should be a little bit more worried about the production side. And really, it kind of sounds like to me that if you were to start today, and let's say that you're running out of 3-4 on the first day, it would be Simmons, little Sebastian, Seabass, and Rashad Weaver would be your defensive lineman, which in all honesty is probably the best fit is a true defensive end for Rashad Weaver.
I think after Sneed and after Ridley in particular, it feels like the value is very obviously at offensive tackle in the first round, whether that's pick 7 or pick 11 or pick 10 or pick 13 with a trade. And it feels like, and it's always felt this way, and I think it's why I've been like mentally stuck on Darius Robinson, for example, at 38, is it feels like a defensive front player of some sort, whether that's a pass rusher like a Darius Robinson, whether that's Tavondre Sweat, the defensive tackle out of Texas, whoever it might be, there is value at 38 at that position. So you can broadly and very generally say, look, lots of great offensive tackle options between 7 and 14, and lots of really good defensive line options between 35 and 45. And that's sort of the value of the draft already. And those are and that's obviously where the Titans are picking. And now that they've addressed corner with a big ticket item, receiver with a big ticket item, interior of the offensive line with a big ticket item, running back with a big ticket item, like they've addressed everything else. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they added another like maybe I don't think safety's in play in the second round. Like I don't.
No, there's not a safety. It goes Tyler Nubin, and then I'm staying away from the safeties till day 3.
I agree. I like Simpson out of Auburn day 3, like 7th round or whatever. But like it seems even more obvious that it's going to be tackle and D line with the first 2 picks now. So
I will say this, and Ed Henry brings up a point, and I've seen people mention his name, but I think we have all forgotten that in 2019 and 2020, Carl Lawson plays for the Bengals. And who was the coach over there? Just saying that Carl Lawson right now, if you wanted to take a 1-year flyer on Lawson, who is still out there in free agency as an edge, and listen, he has health issues. We all know he does. But if you're taking a 1-year flyer, Carl Lawson, and if he stays healthy, Carl Lawson is and always has been a better player than Arden Key. So there is a guy that, in my mind, that if you're talking about adding 1 or 2 guys, and let's say you add one in free agency, 1 in the draft, I think Carl Lawson is a guy that you sign that you know could have some upside, cheap contract, prove it deal, and roll with it. And I think I'd be fine with that. And then you draft maybe that takes the pressure off of edge just a tad bit, but not too much. You get what I'm saying? Maybe you don't have to press for Dallas Turner or in a trade back or whatever, but you maybe get Darius Robinson, or maybe you trade back from 38, pick up picks. I think we're both pro trade back at this point, but Carl Lawson's a guy that I think makes a lot of sense on multiple fronts for this team.
Let me hit a couple comments here. Christopher says, is it April 25th yet? Damn. And by the way, Christopher, I think
30 days away.
I think so. By the way, this is one of the most meta comments, I think, on our particular show. Progress lies not in enhancing what is, but in advancing towards what will be. That's excellent stuff there, Chris. And of course, Dallas Turner commentary here from Andrew says he was a stat stuffer versus bad teams and never played well in big games. Dallas Turner's best play was a dirty hit on Jaden Daniels. I would argue his top 2 plays were dirty hits on Quinn Ewers and Jaden Daniels, but I would still take Dallas Turner on this team. I don't love him at 7, 13, 14. All right, I don't hate it. I don't hate it, but I think Dallas Turner.
He's a red chip player with blue chip traits.
Yeah, I think
so
that's
if you
fair.
can maximize him, if you can maximize his traits, I think that he could turn into a blue chip kind of guy. But
I agree.
I do think that if I was
just take Joe Alt.
Titans, I'm with you. It's really hard to get away from that. But then I also think, well, what if Malik Neighbors is there?
I like Adunze. I like Adunze more than Neighbors. I've come around on that.
I love Adunze, but I feel like this team, maybe Malik Neighbors fits a little bit better than Rome Odunze. But I do wonder what their board looks like. Like, is it Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Joe Alt, and Rome Odunze now? Because there's a couple of rumblings that Titans media is a little bit higher on Rome Odunze than what the team is higher on. that's coming from Teron Davenport. But that doesn't mean that, maybe that means that he's just wide receiver 3, but he's still higher than Joe Alt, or maybe he is wide receiver 3 and lower than Joe Alt. I don't know.
Here's what I would guess is their order. Marvin Harrison 1, Joe Alt 2, trade 3. I think that is their order, if I had to guess.
That'd be a smart order, in my opinion.
It's hard to argue with those 2-3 options.
Yeah. Listen, it's really hard to get. It's going to be really hard to be mad over anything that they do unless they do something like really crazy, right? Unless like
Terry and Arnold.
Terry and Arnold, or they would draft Jackson Powers Johnson, like
a center.
When you're drafting and you get the choice of Joe Alt, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, or a trade back, that's a pretty damn good list of things to choose from.
Jaden Daniels says Stoney Healy. Yeah, that's the one that would piss me off the most. You're right. It's Jaden Daniels. All right. So quickly here, I do want to ask you this, and we did not mention this. This is the highest, I believe, 1 and 2 corner from a pay per year standpoint that the Titans have ever had. They're going to be at about $27 million for the 2 corners. I quickly, just your instincts, because we have time to talk about this in the offseason, but is this the best top 2 receivers that the organization's ever had? Is it the best pair of cover corners that the organization's ever had, at least modern history? I don't know if we can go back and point to like a Samari Roll, combination somewhere in the past, or
that's
Drew Bennett or whatever. I don't know what the combination would be that you think is better.
No, you're 100% right. I think anybody who says that it's at least on paper it is. I mean, we have to see it actually produce, but it's better than Derek Mason, Drew Bennett. It's better than Samari Roll, and was it Williams that was across from him?
Yeah. If we can't remember the
name, it's better than Cortland Finnegan and Jason McCourty, or Jason McCourty and Alteron Werner. I may be getting my teams mixed up here a little bit, but it's better than any of those combination of 3 players that played. I mean, it is by far the best corner. It's Dyson. That's who it was. It was by far the best corner and best wide receiver duo. Yeah, the best corner trio, best wide receiver duo, and I would venture to say this is the best. Not only are they the best separately, but together. Like, I don't think we've ever had 5 top-tier players like that for their position
and on
the team at one time. Because, like, it's always been like, okay, here's Albert Hainsworth. He's really great. But then you have Kerry Collins and Vince Young, and they're all right. So, but then who are the wide receivers? And then, like, CJ and Albert Hainsworth for, like, 1 year. And then it's like, okay, then it's CJ and this guy. Like, to me, we've never seen the Tennessee Titans have 5 premier players. Jeffrey Simmons would make 6, right? So they have 6 premier players on this team right now that all have potentials to be Pro Bowlers or All Pros.
And this is ultimately where I want to land. Although I have one quick point here. Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group, by the way, are great sponsors. Tickets to the Sinkers Beverages draft party are going to be available. We'll get you those links as soon as possible. Here's the other thing. The best backfield combination ever probably has to still be McNair and George. If you think about it, Tannehill and Henry's going to be up there. But Chris Johnson never played with somebody that's good enough to be in this conversation, I wouldn't think. But from a pure talent standpoint, if you go with Levis, Pollard, and Spears, there is a chance they could push to be in that conversation. Mostly because they just haven't had a lot of great ones. they just haven't. But the backfield is one of the places on the roster I don't even think about. I don't even think about the backfield. Quarterback, running back. It's not even a thing that I think about. But ultimately and lastly, this is what, to your point about the 6 high-level players. I remember at one point during the season last year, I think you might have been out, and then we kind of came back when you came back and we talked about it. And I got an argument with Easton about this. I just don't see the dogs. Offense, defense, doesn't matter. They don't have enough players. They don't have good high-level players. And you cannot argue. We can just we'll know in the future whether the Sneed move was the right move or not, or Ridley, or Cushenberry, or any of these other guys. We'll have verdicts on these players in a couple of years. But there's no way that they don't have 4 or 5 times the amount of high-level talent on the team than when we started the free agency process, which, remember, doesn't include Danico Autry, doesn't include Derrick Henry, doesn't include some of the pieces that left. they now have more dogs, and that is all you can ask of a team in the offseason is to add talent and to make your team better.
Well, I mean, I even forgot
see.
to mention Lloyd Cushenberry in that whole list, and now you're up to 7. And you have the potential with Skoronski and Amani Hooker if they can stay healthy or achieve. Because to me, Amani Hooker still has all the talent and all the skills that you're looking for in a safety. And his biggest thing over the last 3 seasons has just been health.
Yeah.
And I think that with the additions in front of him, if he can stay healthy, he will be in the conversation as one of the best defensive backfields in the NFL. And I think that's okay to say even now that it's in contention for it. But you add a Marcus May or Justin Simmons, I don't know. It's going to be it's very hard pressed to find 5 guys between McCreary, Sneed, Cheeto, Amani Hooker, and either Simmons or May across the league that is better than that 5 as a whole.
Don't forget about Otis Reese, says Stoney. Andrew says Hooker's undersized. That's why he's always hurt. Here's what's funny about Hooker. I think when I stand next to him, I'm always surprised that he's smaller than I am, like that he's shorter than I am. But he in pads and a helmet, he is significantly larger than most other defensive backs. Like he's not undersized. Yeah. When he's in pads and a helmet, he is not an undersized. Elijah Molden is undersized. like Amani Hooker is not undersized. I've stood next to him enough times and looked at him straight in the eyes. Like, I mean, I'm 6'1", like 235, and he is in pads significantly bigger than me. So, okay. All right. Draft party, $100 for the Friday night draft party. Bourbon tasting. You're going to get a flight of elite, high-level, exclusive bourbons. We're going to have off-the-record conversations about the second and third round, what the Titans are doing. We'll talk SEC football if you want. Everything is. It's an ask us anything off the record. We're not recording. No devices. Phones. Maybe we'll check phones at the door if we have to, because this is all off the record, and it's how you're going to get the best stuff. And all the money goes to charity. $40, just like last year for Thursday night. All of this is at the Track One building in Wedgwood, Houston. It's where the Sinkers offices are. Of course, shop at Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville. Sign up for the in-crowd to be eligible. We're going to be posting links all across the socials. We want to make sure our audience on the podcast, we're not trying to put this link out to everybody. We want to make sure our audience on the podcast who cares about this stuff wants to come hang out, and we want to give you guys an opportunity to be there. You guys did a great job last year. Can't wait to do it again this year. Less than a month away. Going to be a ton of fun. Kingston Group, of course, you guys know what they are. It's Kingston Group. I don't have to tell you. It's Kingston Group, buildkg.com. Stackingtheinbox.com, football and other F words. You got all the other great shows across the 440 Sports Network. PaulKarski.com, of course, one of the only sites covering the owners' meetings or the NFL meetings down in Orlando. So make sure you've got those notifications turned on as well. Otherwise, I think that's it, Zach. Super Bowl. Are you not entertained, Titans fans? Are you not entertained? They're going to win the whole fucking thing. Okay. Otherwise, thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for chiming in. Stay tuned for those links. Okay. For Zach, I am Braden. Thanks for hanging out. We will talk to you guys on Thursday.